along with people on the is not for me. That is very obviously for this next segment that I know you all have been waiting for. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Liz Hampton to the stage. She is the U.S. Energy Editor for Reuters to be in conversation with the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. I want to remind you this will be conducted under Reuters Trust Principles, which ensures integrity, independence, and freedom from bias in our news coverage. And welcome to the stage, Liz and Mr. Secretary. They're coming.
Where are we sitting?
Maybe the middle. Let's do the middle. All right. Good afternoon and welcome. This is a live broadcast interview as part of the Reuters Next Newsmaker series in partnership with LSEG. I'm joined today by U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright for a conversation on the forces shaping the energy landscape, from supply and demand dynamics to policy and global markets. I have known Secretary Wright for a while, actually, when I was a oilfield services reporter, and he was the CEO of Liberty Energy. Interviewed him a lot, but never in this capacity. So
not in New York City either.
No, not. We're Denverites. So this is really exciting. We'd also like to hear from all of you, so please submit your questions using the app, and we'll keep an eye on these screens throughout the interview, and I hope to get a few of them. So let's get started. I want to start with the Iran war. So, hot topic, obviously. It took more than 3 months to arrive at this MOU, which is a lot longer than, the administration initially said. I think it's a lot longer than a lot of people in the energy industry thought it would take. But I want to go back to the very beginning. And as the energy secretary for the world's largest oil producer, in those early days, what were your biggest concerns for global markets and for the United States?
Oh, yeah, obviously it's a major energy supplying region. The president certainly was well aware that if you take military action against Iran, you're going to impact the flow of energy supplies. I heard a lot of press reporting saying this was a surprise, total nonsense. Not a surprise at all. I'm crazy proud of the president for doing this, though. With the actions that Operation Midnight Hammer last June set back their program quite a bit. Would Iran get a deployable nuclear weapon during his administration with a threat of more military attacks? Probably not. But he did not want to hand to his successors a nuclear-armed Iran. That is a massive threat, not just to global energy supplies that you can't do anything about if they're armed nuclearly, but it's a massive threat to the peace in that region, to the existence of Israel, to peace in this world. So he took a bold action knowing it would impact energy markets, but the United States' energy production, our relations with our allies, that we would make our way through it. We would take mitigating actions, which we have done by, coordinated releases across the strategic petroleum reserves of 32 countries, unsanctioning oil that was floating on the ground already, using the bypass pipelines, working with our allies, changing blending requirements for gasoline to grow our production in the U.S. So a challenge, real impacts to it, but nowhere near the price elevation we saw 4 years ago during the Biden administration without any interruption of global flow of global oil.
So what is the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz? And since the MOU was signed, how many ships are getting in and out? Do you have any sense of that?
I could say roughly 72 ships in the last 24 hours and 20 million barrels of oil. 19 million barrels of oil the day before, 18, 16, 15. Before the MOU was signed, through just our military route in the southern part, the Omani waters, the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz, we had returned oil flows to about half of the missing amount of oil. 20 to start with, 5 or 6 were diverted by pipelines. We were missing 14 million barrels of oil. We had 7 million barrels of oil flowing through the strait before the MOU. Today, it's at 20, and you still have excess oil flowing through the pipelines. So flow of oil out of the Arabian Gulf today is higher than it was before the conflict.
Okay, but how long do you think it will take for normal flows to return through the strait?
Well, we have above normal flows. We have normal flows today through the strait, 20 million barrels.
I think it was like roughly 125 ships were going through. You said 70?
72, because it's bigger ships now, oil-heavy ships. So the one thing that will delay things a little bit is, unfortunately, the Iranians mined the ship channel. So all the ships that are going through today are not going through the central ship channel. They're going through either the northern route by the Iranian islands or the southern route with U.S. military escort through the Omani waters. So to return to complete normalcy takes a demining of the strait. And that's probably a few weeks' effort. Okay. But for energy flows and critical materials, they all have a pathway out right now. Critical for us is that even without an agreement with Iran, with the U.S. military and some of the things we've developed, we can assure the flow of energy out of the Gulf with or without an agreement with Iran.
So after this 60-day period, how are you going to ensure that there's not fees imposed on vessels and that the strait does not close again?
Well, number one, when Iran, they declared the strait closed like 5 days ago, and we got 17 million barrels of oil through it. So Iran will not have the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz going forward. That's a critical thing. That's their key leverage, and we're taking that leverage away from them. And that's U.S. military escorts. That's an ability to prevent their interdiction of ships. They do cause trouble. They are a problem. The better solution is to have an agreement with the Iranians where they get some benefit and we get a more permanent end to their nuclear program. We have a good chance of getting that today because we have two things today with Iran that we've never had before. Number one, they've been struck. They've never meaningfully been struck in 47 years. Their nuclear program, their missile, their drone, their military industrial complex has been massively degraded. And number two, we demonstrated over 60 days that we can shut their flow of oil down to zero. We can do that with our Navy, and we're willing to do that. So we have different leverage, a different calculus for the regime today than we've ever had before. I think that increases the odds of a deal that's a win for America and that works for the Iranians. But you never know. We have to be in a situation, and we are in a situation, that if we can get no deal with Iran, we will assure that the flow of energy is there, the world is well supplied, and the Iranian administration will be in a world of hurt. And that may drive ultimately change in Iranian behavior just simply by the failure of the regime.
The sanctions waiver, is that a win for Iran?
So I think people should realize what we did for Iran. I hear all these numbers. Oh my God, we've given them billions of dollars. This is worse than the JCPOA. It's nothing of the sort. Iran, during the Biden administration, sold 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day of oil every day flowing through the strait. There were sanctions, so they sold the oil to China. They got paid in RMB, and they had to disproportionately buy Chinese goods. Today, all we did, and then we stopped all of their flow of oil for 60 days, and now the sanction waivers means they can sell it multiple places, they can get paid in dollars, so that's a little better than they were before today. It's a plus for Iran, but I would say it's not a giant plus. We haven't unfrozen any funds, they haven't got anything meaningful yet. They could get meaningful things from us, but they have to deliver meaningful wins for us and security for the world.
Okay, I'm going to jump to an audience question real quick. The current administration promised deregulation in the energy sector in pursuit of energy independence. What material advancements have been made towards that so far?
Wow, a lot, and that is a long-going process. You've probably seen a number of our announcements with FERC. For the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, we've changed the commission. We are changing how things are prioritized in the FERC queue. If you're going to provide reliable, dispatchable power, you've got a customer for it. We're going to move that to the front of the queue. We are moving that to the front of the queue. Right at the start, the Biden administration had paused LNG export approvals. We've approved a significant amount. I'm trying to think of the number, something like 80 million tons per annum of new permitting for LNG export terminals. We have followed the law and held lease sales in federal lands from Alaska through Texas to offshore. We changed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We're using regulatory authority of the DOE. We've had 2 reactors, non-light water reactors, go critical in the last few weeks First time in over 40 years. We expect another one before July 4. I mean, NEPA reform, we did it at DOE and at every issuing agency. 2/3 of the people that applied for NEPA permits in the past should not even apply for them. We went back to the original intent of the law in the 1970s. Just as we were releasing our new regs, the Supreme Court came out with a unanimous decision agreeing with our reading of the law that NEPA should be as it was written in the 1970s and not the weaponization it's become to block building things in America. And of course, we're working with bipartisan permitting reform right now. We hope to get something done this summer. That would be another legacy achievement.
Great. And please keep the questions coming. And I do want to jump back to the nuclear stuff in a bit.
You bet.
I want to jump to energy prices right now. Today, I don't know if you've been watching your screen, WTI fell under $70 a barrel. Brent's under 74. That's, between a $45 to $50, downward move from the highs during the war. And if you're an investor, or if you were the CEO of an oil field company, and you're looking to make long-term investments, and you're seeing these huge fluctuations in oil prices, and sometimes it's a social media, post that can drive a $5 to $10 swing. How do you plan for the future?
First of all, if you run a business or you're an investor, day-to-day swings don't matter. Week-to-week swings don't matter. For traders, they do, but that's not investing. That's not running businesses. Those are longer-term trends. What I think of if I'm an investor in the energy space, 1 billion people in the world live lives remotely recognizable to us in this room. We've got temperature-controlled rooms, and we've got motorized transport, got fancy clothes made with and out of hydrocarbons. 1 billion people live like us. We consume 13 barrels of oil per person per year. The other 7 billion people on the planet consume 3 barrels of oil per person per year. I haven't met all 7 billion, but I've not met one that doesn't want the lifestyle we have. So I think it's a certainty that demand for energy will continue to grow as far as the eye can see. It's grown at a relatively steady compound annual growth rate over the last 50 years. I think we will see that for as far as the eye can see going forward. So if somebody's a low-cost provider of energy that's critical for making the world go round, probably got a long-term business.
Sticking with oil prices, a lot of analysts early on expected prices to go to $200 a barrel. You've had millions of barrels of oil removed from the market. Why aren't prices higher?
Yeah, this is a tremendous question. So 4 years ago, in the middle of the Biden administration, gasoline prices were over $5 a gallon, well above where they peaked in this crisis. That's after Russia invaded Ukraine. There was no reduction in Russia's exports of oil or refined products. So without a reduction in flow, they got to $5 gasoline. Now, that's an administration that said at the start, we will end fossil fuels. They stopped permitting on federal land. They said they laid out their plan to choke the hydrocarbon industry. Of course, that's totally nuts. United States energy was 81% from hydrocarbons when Biden was inaugurated and 81% when he left office. Like, the world runs on oil, gas, and coal. It does. It did when I was born. It will when I die. And I'm an alternative energy guy, but that's just the facts. So that kind of leadership, shunning the producers in the Middle East, what did they think? America's hostile to us. We better maximize what we get from energy prices. We're an opposing force to the United States. We have a world now that knows the United States believes in more energy. We're partners with energy producers. We want economic growth. We want prosperity for the world. There's a lot more confidence, not just in today's supply, but supply is going to grow. We've doubled Venezuelan oil exports in just 4 months, 5 months of being involved in Venezuela. U.S. oil production are at all-time highs. United States, the last 2 months, is the #1 exporter of oil in the world. Saudi Arabia and Russia are 2 and 3. We're by far the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, and both of those are growing meaningfully. So we have meaningful growth in supply, a constructive relationship, who understands that energy is critical. We're not going to let the world be starved of energy. Iran had some success in these munitions, scaring ships out of the strait. We knew that was coming, but we have a response to that. They will not be able to do that in the long run, and I think the world is comfortable that oil will flow, energy will flow, and the world economy will grow.
I want to jump back to Venezuela in a minute or two, but you mentioned gasoline prices. They've fallen for the last 6 weeks. Does this mean a gas tax holiday is probably dead?
Look, always all ideas have been on the table. For like the 5 or 7 things we've done, we've probably talked about 20 ideas. So the President Trump is absolutely focused every day, literally 7 days a week, on how do you lower energy prices. He's got ideas. Everyone throws out ideas. We talk about them. So we try to find the ones that are the most effective in driving energy prices down.
And on a couple of those, the Jones Act waiver, what's going to happen with the Jones Act waiver?
You know, that's another dialogue. It was enormously effective in supplying energy. California has made horrible decisions and made themselves an energy island. They would have been at meaningful supply risk because over 60% of the oil in California is imported from overseas across the Pacific Ocean. The United States is a net exporter, but not. California's made themselves an island. Jones Act allowed us to reliably supply all the west coast of California and Alaska and the East Coast. It's been very effective at moving energy around. I'm sure the dialogue about what's to do there will continue.
Great. And one more before we go to Venezuela on these measures to mitigate rising prices. The SPR, it's always a interesting topic. It's at over a 40-year low. I think this morning when the data came out, it was 1984. It's at the lowest level since then. I know you said these are not, releases. It's more of a loan program where it will be paid back and then some. So what type of traction are you getting in this kind of structure for refilling the SPR, and when will it be full or back to levels where you would want it?
Yeah. So great question. Yes, and as you just said, the Biden administration sold 200 million barrels of oil without an interruption of oil flow for political purposes. We did not do that. We will not do that. That Strategic Petroleum Reserve is when there's interruptions of flows, and the United States and the world needs supplies. And you're right. We did not sell a single barrel. We swapped barrels. We took advantage of the structure of oil prices that were very high in the front months and lower in the back months. The swaps we've done so far average 1.28 barrels back for every 1 barrel we've released. So we will, at the end of this, have 35 to 40 million more barrels in the SPR than when we started our releases, at no cost to the American taxpayers. We delivered oil in the short run, and then, by late this year and next year, that oil will all be coming back in. We'll be well over 400 million barrels of oil in the SPR. And in fact, we're looking at other creative ideas that also don't involve taxpayer money to maybe get the SPR over 500 million barrels.
Can you share any of those?
Not yet, because we're still working on them. But,
right.
you'll hear about them. Just common sense business stuff to harvest resources that delivers oil to the United States government.
Okay, we'll stay tuned for those. All right, let's jump to Venezuela. So there's a lot of interest in going into Venezuela to develop its natural resources. There's also a lot of challenges. Chevron's there, and it seems like trade houses have been the beneficiary so far. Exxon and Conoco seem more cautious for good reason. Do you think, will Exxon go into Venezuela? And have you talked to Darren Woods? What can you share on that?
Yeah, look, of course, I speak to Darren and Ryan from Conoco all the time and stay in touch with them. They run great businesses, and they've got to make decisions based on, does it make sense for my business? But I will tell you, both of them are very seriously looking at it. We are also working with the government of Venezuela. Think of the dramatic transformation, from just over the last 5-6 months. That went from an incredibly unhospitable investment environment to now oil production is growing rapidly. Capital is flowing into Venezuela, both from incumbent players, mostly from incumbent players today, but there are a lot of new entrants looking at it. We are in a dialogue right now about what's the right hydrocarbon law that wins for Venezuela and encourages investment in the country. And those haven't been resolved yet, but I think in the next few weeks, few months at most, you'll see an investment climate in Venezuela that'll be a big win for the country of Venezuela, for American businesses that want to go invest. And I think we've roughly doubled Venezuelan exports already, and I think we can double Venezuelan exports again during this administration, which moved Venezuela to over 2 million barrels a day of oil export. That's 50% of Russia's oil exports.
Great. Yeah, one of my questions was about the regulatory framework, so thank you for hitting on that. Who's actually in charge of Venezuela right now?
So Delcy Rodriguez is the president of Venezuela right now. We have enormous leverage over her, and we are working in partnership with her. But the United States still controls all the flow of oil out of Venezuela, and we control the flow of the funds. We sell that. Let me give a quick story to illustrate this. Before we went in, on January 2nd of this year, about a quarter of the oil that flowed out of Venezuela was stolen by cronies of Maduro and other criminal gangs. It went to bank accounts away. It did not go back to Venezuela. 3/4 of that oil, roughly, was sold. It was all sold to China. Oil then was $60 a barrel. China paid them $30, $29 discount off the market price of oil, and then kept half of the proceeds for debt repayment. Well, Venezuela owes a lot of countries money. So Venezuela was netting $15 a barrel for the oil barrels that were not stolen. Now, those barrels are sold at market prices, not at these gigantic discounts. All of that money is put into accounts that are controlled by the United States, and all of that funds are dispersed to Venezuela. And if they work with us and continue as a partnership, that flow of funds will continue exactly as it is until there's an election. But ultimately, there will be an election, and there will be a representative government in Venezuela, and it will return to full sovereignty. But that takes time to do all of that. To me, I've never seen a country transform so dramatically. No American boots on the ground except for about a 2-hour period. No American boots on the ground. When I'm in Venezuela, people are thrilled. There are tears in people's eyes that the United States is here. We're not only benefiting America and the Western Hemisphere by getting rid of the criminality and the drug running and the 8 million people that fled this disastrous country. We're not only benefiting by that reduction of crime, oil that our refineries were built to refine, but Venezuelans are massively benefiting. This will go down as maybe one of the coolest geopolitical movements ever. This is Trump creativity at its best.
Do you have any trips planned to return soon?
I do expect I will go later this year. I expect I will go later this year. Yeah, it depends on our progress. We want to make Venezuela a peaceful, thriving country that's a great neighbor to the whole Western Hemisphere and a huge benefit to the United States.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go to an audience question, and then I want to get to power and AI and data centers. So let's just do the first one. Secretary Wright, why has the administration done so much to stifle renewable energy development when we need all the energy we can get to rapidly meet demand?
Yeah, so I say energy is about people. We produce energy for people and math. The main thing we've done of course, renewable energy is a marketing term. There's nothing renewable about polysilicon and steel and cement and all. They're not renewable. They're just alternative ways to produce energy. But the problem is they're very material intensive, very land intensive, and very subsidy intensive. And then they deliver a relatively low value energy because it's only there some of the time. If it was like a gas tank and you could just keep pouring a little bit of this into your tank and storing it, that would be one thing. But this cold weather Ferns winter storm we had, January 27th, at peak demand time in New England got 2% of its electricity from wind, solar, and batteries combined. It got 50% more electricity from burning trash and wood. It got, hydropower, nuclear power, and oil burning and natural gas are what kept the lights on in New England. If you provide excess power in the middle of the day because it's windy out, that power has very little value. It just means an existing natural gas plant has to turn down. The sun came out of a cloud, turned the power down. The wind started to blow, turned the power, it went behind a cloud, turned the power back up. The incremental change in cost of that is 2 cents per kilowatt hour of less gas that's burned. The federal government sends a 3-cent check to the wind power provider. The utility has a contract to pay them 5, 7, 8, 9 cents in addition to that, and you got to build additional transmission to support it. So if you spend a dime and you get 2 cents of benefit, you get an obvious thing. You get huge government expenditures and more expensive electricity prices. So by removing the subsidies, now they're going to compete, and we need to reform the electricity market so you pay for value. If you're only there some of the time, that's just a different value proposition. You can't add a new data center or a new factory if you don't have any new power at peak demand time. The only way to think about electricity is not where's the average electricity come from. It's what delivered power at peak demand times. That's what drives the cost of your grid. That's what drives the reliability of your grid. They've been very poor performers in that. But in a free market with the subsidies gone and a reasonably structured market, people are going to continue to build solar for sure. We're not against that. Not against that at all. But they, 35 years, that's enough. After 35 years of subsidies, you got to walk on your own.
Okay, I'll do another audience question. Does the DOE currently support coal to nuclear transition domestically and or abroad in countries with coal phase-out policies and or net zero targets?
Well, look, one of the first times I used the 202C authority of the Department of Energy was to stop the closure of a coal plant in Southwest Michigan. And the argument was, well, they had made a coal transition plan at the governor level of Michigan. They didn't look at their math. They didn't look at their energy. MISO is a very tight market. In fact, 2 days after we issued that order, we almost had a blackout at MISO. That coal plant was running flat out. If that coal plant had not been running, we would have had blackouts. We stopped, not all with 202C authority, mostly once we stopped the closure of a number of coal plants, a number of other utilities and states said, oh, so we're not going to be shot if we don't close our coal plants. It's okay not to close the coal plants. And so 17 gigawatts of coal that would have been closed if we had a President Harris wasn't closed. In that winter storm Fern at the end of January, hundreds, if not thousands of Americans would have died if we had closed all that coal, because the electricity grid was to the ragged edge of survival. We were turning on backup generators at hundreds of giant supermarkets or data centers to keep enough juice to keep the lights on. Boy, when you have that tight of a grid and you have people that want to build and expand and grow our country, you should not be closing assets with plenty of useful life left. We're about energy addition, not energy subtraction. We don't want to replace coal with nuclear. We want the coal plant and the nuclear plant too, and the gas plant too. And if we got pretty good energy storage, let's add some solar in there too.
So you've mentioned data centers.
Geothermal as well. Fusion's coming too.
You mentioned data centers. So hot topic, you can't go to any conference and not have them take up a decent amount of energy, no pun intended. How are you going to balance, the build out of data centers with rising power bills?
Yeah, so a huge topic of the day. And there's a movement now against data centers. It's the same people, the same playbook, the same funders as it was in the anti-frack movement, the climate alarmist movement. You go around and you scare people. The world's about to end. All your water's going to be gone. Electricity is not going to be there for you. This is very effective. But the facts and data, of course, are quite contrary to that. If you look today, as we do, you look at all the states in the United States, and you look at who produces more electricity today than they did 5 or 10 years ago. The state with the fastest demand growth is North Dakota, lowest electricity prices. Texas, Nebraska, Kentucky, growth in demand, low electricity prices. New York, California, Massachusetts, Maryland, Delaware, the states with the highest electricity prices and fastest rising electricity prices, all of them produce less electricity today than they did 5 or 10 years ago. Demand growth is your friend. Through this ratepayer protection pledge, when big data centers are built, there are deals done with utilities that freeze electricity rates for 3, 4, or 5 years. They're the biggest tool we have to stop the rise in electricity prices and ultimately to put us in a position to drive electricity prices down. And the reason is, what are people adding for data centers? They're adding the cheapest, most efficient power. Maybe it's restarting a nuclear power plant that was prematurely shut down. Maybe it's uprating a natural gas plant. We have tens of gigawatts of natural gas power plants under construction and development right now. They run all the time. They're very cheap sources of reliable, dependable electricity. As you increase the concentration of those kind of sources on our grid, the average cost of electricity will go down.
What about the pushback, the environmental pushback around data centers, which you mentioned, was similar to fracking, which was your business? There's a lot of concerns about water usage and that some of these, facilities are connecting without proper input from local communities that could be affected. How are you going to address that?
So first, the water issue. Same thing in fracking, and there I got the data that all the fracking in the U.S. uses a fraction of the water that we use with golf courses. And I love golf courses, but one is 10% of economic activity and one's some fun. So they're not, data centers is the same story. They're very, very modest consumers of water, and with the per dollar of GDP, there's probably no more efficient use of water, maybe washing diamonds, but. And the new data centers are built, a lot of them, with closed-loop cooling systems, almost no water consumption at all. But you do have to engage with the community. If you go in and just announce you're building something huge, people around you are going to be unhappy. So like any new development in new communities, it pays to get out front. Has it always been done perfectly? Absolutely not. Things have been done incorrectly. But the behavior today of large data center developers, I think in general, is outstanding. They're getting there early. They're engaging with the community. They're laying out the lists of benefits they're going to bring. They're listening to the communities. They're investing in job training. They're huge taxpayers. So look, this is a massive win for communities where it's developed, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars of capital being flowed. Needs to be done carefully and intelligently. I'm proud of the overall record. Can you find things that have been done wrong? Sure. But the overall record, I think, is pretty outstanding. And the opponents of data centers who have public turned against it now, just like they did with fracking, they will lose. The facts will prevail. And 5 years from now, we won't talk about that noise.
So we're almost at the end. I'm going to take one more question. Let's do this U.S.-China question. As global energy demand continues to grow, where do you see the greatest opportunities for practical cooperation between the U.S. and China in energy?
So 20 years ago, the United States was the biggest importer of natural gas in the world and the biggest importer of oil in the world. Today, China's taken over both of those roles. They're just by far and away the world's biggest importer of oil. They're also the world's biggest importer of natural gas. So there's a natural trade there. China has a huge petrochemical industry. We send a huge amount of ethane, sort of one more carbon atom than methane, to China that's used in petrochemical. We've sold oil to China. We sell natural gas to China. Look, they're a major industrial economy. They're a partner with ours. We have in the last 20 years, we've tripled our oil production, more than doubled our natural gas production, and barely grown our electricity production. That is a failure of government. That is a failure of regulation and policies that have made it just so hard to put rational things. Instead of thinking the electricity grid was about humans and ratepayers and businesses, we decided that the purpose of the electricity grid was to change the temperature of the planet by 1/100th of a degree a century from now. That's just a wildly irresponsible and massive malinvestment. But that's where we've been for 15 years. So we are unwinding that so we can develop electricity, grow our generation of electricity. China has the opposite story. They've tried very hard to grow their oil and natural gas production. They've grown both of them relatively modestly. In the last 25 years, they've quadrupled their electricity production. Just build it. Build it. We need to make it so you can build things in America today. You can do math, you can do economics, you can think about your citizens, your customers, your businesses, and do it. But that is not where we've been in the electricity grid. It's been politicized and wildly over and poorly regulated. That's a huge mansion of our thing. One last thing, Liz, if I can just throw in really quickly. The European Union is a huge importer of American energy. And of course, a longtime economic, cultural, and military partner of ours. They put out regulations that are going to make it almost impossible for them to import natural gas from the United States, from Algeria, from Qatar, from everywhere else. It is the biggest source of electricity on the continent of Europe. It is the key fuel for them if they want to get into AI or into industry. They pass some just crazy regulation. They're working on it right now, trying to fix it, but they have not fixed it. Myself, the energy ministers of Algeria, Nigeria, and Qatar sent a letter, an open letter to the European Union, who has a vote on Friday, saying, reform your regulations or you're going to lead to massively higher energy prices in Europe, and you're going to have meaningful risk of blackouts or heating struggles this coming winter. There's just no reason for that. Let's bring common sense into energy, not just in the United States, but in our friends and allies abroad as well.
All right. Well, with that, we're at time. And I guess everyone's hungry for lunch probably. But it's such a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you. Please join me in thanking Secretary Wright.
Thanks so much, Liz.
Right.
Thanks so much, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Liz. And Liz is right. It is lunchtime. It is on